Okay, so let's jump right in. There's this really wild story that broke recently.
Yeah, quite something. Really kicked things off.
Imagine opening the news, May 22nd, 2025, right? And the U.S. government has essentially banned Harvard from enrolling new international students.
It's pretty shocking. And the reason the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, gave, well, it was stark.
What did they actually say?
They claimed Harvard created an unsafe campus, specifically letting anti-American pro-terrorist agitators harass and assault people. They even mentioned Jewish students specifically.
Wow. Okay. So this is the deep dive, and what we're going to do is unpack this. We've got a stack of sources here, news reports from Nature, BBC, The Guardian, the big outlets.
And also some commentary speculation from places like Reddit to get a feel for the public reaction to.
Exactly. So the mission here is to figure out what's really going on. We need to look at the facts as reported, the immediate consequences, the reactions, and maybe try to understand the layers behind this clash.
Yeah, there's the official action itself, the immediate fallout for students, this pretty significant global reaction, and also the history, right? The context of the tensions leading up to this.
Right. That's the core question, isn't it? What's actually happening? What does it mean right now? And what are the sort of deeper implications when the government goes head-to-head with a university like Harvard?
Let's
So dig in.
Okay, so the core action. DHS, led by Secretary Kristi Noem, revoked Harvard's certification for the Student and Exchange Visitor Program. SEVP, they call it.
And that's the key thing universities need for international students, right? The visas.
Exactly. F1, J1 visas. Without that SEVP certification, they can't legally enroll new students on those visas, and they revoked it for the 2025-2026 academic year.
So a full year ban on new international students, basically.
Pretty much. And Secretary Noem, she made it very public, went on X, formerly Twitter, and posted a message.
What does it say?
Quote, "Let this serve as a warning to all universities and academic institutions across the country."
Oof, that's blunt, not subtle.
Not subtle at all, and the immediate effect on people, on the students, was just immense.
How many students are we talking about?
Harvard has over 7,000 international students currently. That's like 27% of the whole student body. So suddenly, thousands of people were thrown into total uncertainty.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Facing what? Having to transfer? Losing their status?
Exactly that. Transferring universities, maybe having their legal right to stay in the U.S. just disappear. The sources had quotes from students. You could feel the fear, the frustration.
What were they saying?
Well, one student said they felt like poker chips in a bigger political game. Others talked about how this action felt like it undermined the very reasons they came to the U.S., freedom of speech, academic freedom.
As powerful.
Yeah. And another quote that really stood out was, "Without the international students, Harvard is simply not Harvard anymore."
It's hard. So how did Harvard react? They didn't just take it, presumably.
No, definitely not. They were fast. Called the government's move unlawful and retaliatory. Warned it would hurt the university, obviously, but also the country.
And they took legal action?
Yep. The very next day, Friday, May 23rd, they sued the government. And interestingly, a judge in Massachusetts actually put a temporary stop to the policy almost immediately, like within hours.
Okay, so the ban is paused for now.
Temporarily halted, yes. But the fight itself, that's definitely not over. The core conflict is still very much alive.
Right. And you mentioned a global reaction. How did the rest of the world see this?
Well, first, Harvard itself really emphasized how much international students contribute, Enriching the place, enriching the U.S. immeasurably was the term they used.
And there's that concern about brain drain, isn't there, if the U.S. looks unwelcoming?
Absolutely. The sources really highlight that risk. If international talent feels uncertain or targeted, they might just go elsewhere.
And did we see that happen? Other countries trying to attract these students?
Immediately. It was striking how fast. Sources point specifically to universities in Hong Kong, HKU, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, HKUST.
What did they do?
They basically started actively recruiting Harvard's international students, the ones affected by this. And they even signaled they were open to students from other U.S. universities potentially facing similar issues.
Were they offering specifics? Like practical help?
Yeah, HKU reportedly offered dedicated scholarships, help with housing, guidance on transferring academic credits. They were quite explicit, actually, mentioning the uncertainty created by these recent U.S. developments.
Wow. So they're seeing an opportunity there.
Clearly. It just shows how competitive the global landscape is for academic talent.
Okay, so this specific ban was sudden, but you said it didn't come out of nowhere. there's a backstory here.
Right. The sources are clear on this. This is like the latest, maybe the most dramatic move in a conflict that's been escalating for a while between this administration and Harvard.
What happened before?
Sources mention a key moment back in April. The administration apparently demanded more oversight over Harvard's admissions and hiring.
Oversight, like telling them who to admit or hire.
The specifics aren't fully detailed in all sources, but Harvard refused. They saw it as the government trying to regulate the university's intellectual conditions, basically interfering with academic independence.
And that refusal had consequences.
It seems so. After that, the government reportedly cut billions with a B in federal funding. Sources mention threats to review about $9 billion and actual cuts hitting nearly 1,000 research grants.
That's a massive financial hit, especially for research.
Huge. And it seems Harvard isn't totally alone in feeling this pressure. The sources say the administration has investigated dozens of other universities.
Really? Any named examples?
Columbia University was mentioned as one place where the administration apparently managed to wring concessions. So Harvard's the big headline, but it's part of a broader pattern of pressure.
Okay, back to the ban. Did the DHS say what Harvard needed to do to get its certification back?
They reportedly gave Harvard just 72 hours.
72 hours. To do what?
To comply with some pretty demanding requests, things like providing disciplinary records for all non-immigrant students going back 5 years.
All of them. Wow.
Yeah, and also any electronic records, videos, audio recordings of what the administration called illegal, dangerous, or violent activity by international students on campus.
72 hours to produce all that?
Ex-
That sounds almost impossible.
The sources definitely frame these demands as highly unusual, very burdensome. It underscores the level of pressure.
And does this fit into anything bigger happening nationally with international students?
It seems to. Sources mention broader attempts by the administration to sort of tighten the screws on individual student visas across the country.
How so?
Sometimes linking visa status to things like participating in political protests or even facing minor criminal charges. This has apparently led to a lot of confusion, lawsuits nationwide.
Right, I think I read about that. Didn't another judge step in somewhere else?
Yes, exactly. A separate federal judge out in California actually blocked the administration from canceling the legal status of international students nationwide while those broader legal challenges play out.
Okay, so there's a lot going on. We've got the action, the immediate context.
Yeah.
But the big question everyone seems to be asking in the sources is, why? Why target Harvard like this right now?
Well, you have the official reasons put forward by the administration.
Which were?
As reported, it was about Harvard failing to follow the law, creating that unsafe campus environment we talked about, and also being, quote, very anti-Semitic. That's their stated case.
And Harvard's counter.
Their official line, again from the sources, is that it's unlawful. It's retaliation for them pushing back earlier on those oversight demands, and basically an attempt to control academic decisions and intellectual conditions.
Okay, so those are the official positions. But the sources, especially the commentary and online discussions, they float a lot of other ideas, don't they?
Oh, yeah. A whole range of theories and speculation. And we should stress again, these are viewpoints found in the sources. We're not saying they're fact, but they show how people are trying to make sense of it.
It's interesting how varied they are. What kinds of theories are out there?
Well, you see some that are quite personal, almost bordering on rumor, though obviously unconfirmed by mainstream news.
Like what?
Things like speculation that Barron Trump got rejected by Harvard or other Ivies, or even that Donald Trump himself was rejected way back. The fact Obama's daughters went to Harvard gets mentioned too in these discussions.
So the idea is some kind of personal grudge.
That's one theory floated in some corners, that the administration targets institutions or people seen as defiant or part of an elite it opposes. Some sources even try to link it to, like, past business conflicts, mentioning the Pritzker family, owners of Hyatt, one of whom is on Harvard's board, or an old real estate thing with Columbia. Again, very speculative stuff found in some source discussions.
Okay, what about less personal, more political theories?
A lot of sources discuss this as part of a broader attack on perceived liberal institutions, targeting academia, intellectuals, critical thinking itself.
Is it linked to any Specific agendas?
Some sources connect it to wider conservative movements aiming to reshape education, mentioning things like Agenda 47 or Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. The idea presented in these sources is that these are long-term plans to fundamentally change institutions like universities and government agencies.
So, under this theory, Harvard is being made an example.
Exactly. Make an example of Harvard to get other universities to fall in line, or it's seen as attacking what some critics call the cathedral, that term for mainstream academia and media.
Interesting. Any other angles? Strategic ones, maybe?
Yeah, some sources wonder if it's a strategic move. Like, is this whole conflict a useful distraction from other problems the administration might be facing?
A distraction.
Or is it designed to fire up a certain political base, playing to anti-elite or anti-intellectual sentiment by going after a big symbol like Harvard? There's even speculation, though less prominent, that maybe it's a way to put pressure on other countries by targeting their students here.
So a real mix of potential explanations floating around in the sources, official lines, retaliation claims, personal grudges, ideological battles, political strategy.
Exactly. The sources don't give us one simple why. They paint this really complex picture with lots of potential factors, some conflicting. Our job here is just to lay out what those sources are saying, the different ways they're trying to interpret this.
Okay, so thinking about all this, the ban, the lawsuit, the global ripples, these competing theories, why should this matter to, you listening? What's at stake here?
Well, it raises some fundamental questions, doesn't it? About academic freedom, for one. Can universities operate independently, make their own academic choices?
And what about the flow of talent? That brain drain idea. If international students feel unwelcome or unsafe, does the U.S. lose out on brilliant minds?
Definitely a concern raised. And what about the reputation of U.S. universities globally? They've long been seen as, the gold standard. Does this tarnish that?
It also makes you think about the role of universities in society, right? When they become these battlegrounds for political fights, what happens to their core mission?
Yeah. There was this analogy used by David Brooks, quoted in one source, that kind of stuck with me.
What was it?
He basically said attacking a top university like Harvard for its flaws, and universities do have flaws, like maybe allowing anti-Semitism or being an echo chamber attacking it this drastically is like decapitating someone because they have acne.
Wow, that's vivid.
It is. The point being, it's maybe an extreme destructive response that damages something valuable. Even if you acknowledge the criticisms aren't entirely baseless, it highlights the severity of this action.
So to sort of wrap this deep dive up, we've seen this really unprecedented government action against Harvard's international student enrollment.
Met with a very fast, very strong legal challenge from Harvard.
And it's kicked off this global reaction, tons of debate, loads of different theories swirling about the real motives.
And while that judge put a temporary hold on the ban, the actual conflict, the underlying tensions about university independence, academic freedom, the administration's goals, that's still very much unresolved. It's tense.
Right. Which leaves us and you with something pretty significant to think about. What happens long-term when our universities become these direct targets, these political battlegrounds? What does it mean for higher education, for just pursuing knowledge, for freely exchanging ideas? And maybe the trickiest part, how do we hold powerful institutions like universities accountable for real problems without crushing the very principles that let them function in the first place?
Yeah, it's a tough balance, and this situation really throws that challenge into sharp relief. Lots to consider there.